Back here on the Daytona Tortugas Radio Network and the pregame show, Justin Rocke joined alongside one of the other voices of the Daytona Tortugas. You hear him when you come out to Jackie Robinson Ballpark, our outstanding MC, the young professor. Mr. Professor, you're almost through your first full season as the on-field MC here at Jackie Robinson Ballpark. How has the season gone for you? How have you enjoyed your time here at Jackie Robinson Ballpark?
It has been fantastic, Justin, and it is a pleasure to finally get up here in the booth, sit next to you, and have a little air conditioning as I'm talking to some of our Tortugas fans.
Yeah, no, the air conditioning comes in handy quite a lot down here in Florida, as you know very well. But as your first season with the Tortugas, how did you end up getting connected to our general manager, Jim Jaworski, and becoming our on-field MC? Because for at least 2019, my first year here, Jim was the on-field MC. Obviously a little bit harder for him to do that here in 2021.
Sure. Well, Jim and I actually met 11 years ago, believe it or not. I moved here. I had just moved to Florida by way of Illinois. That's where I went to graduate school and didn't really know anybody down here when I first moved here. So I went to a professional networking event for a young professionals group. And I saw a gentleman standing there, I use that term loosely, wearing what was Cubs gear at the time, because once upon a time we were the Daytona Cubs. But since I had just come down from Illinois, those were some familiar colors, and struck up a conversation. And I met Jim Jaworski, who was working in ticket sales at the time. So I was not even quite a professor, and he was certainly not a GM, but that is the first time he and I got connected, and we maintained a relationship over the years. When I did become a college professor, I was working here in Daytona Beach, working in the field of exercise science. And as Jim climbed up the ranks, we stayed in touch. I did a few field trips out here with my students. He would have us come and talk with strength and conditioning coaches, the athletic trainers. And that was something that was good and a value for my students. And as I started to do more in entertainment and then started working in arena football, Jim took notice. And originally, he had called me at the end of 2019, and we were looking to do some work together for 2020, but nobody did any work in 2020, so that was shelved. But 2021 is here, and man, what a season it has been. It has been an absolute blast out here.
Is there any favorite moment so far during the course of this season? Because there's obviously been so many, and earlier this week, minor league baseball retweeting the scene with Sheldon and a couple of the wrestling guys you brought out of the ballpark, but I'm sure there's more than just that comes to mind.
Oh, you know what? We've done a lot of really wrestling-related stuff. It seems like there's a common love, at least in the production booth, for some of that stuff with those guys and myself. But, yeah, Sheldon getting super kicked by two of my best friends and a fantastic tag team by the name of Task Force certainly ranks at the top of things there. You know what? I think some of the most memorable events for me are when things went horribly wrong. They were some of the funniest, most genuine moments. There was, I don't even know if I should mention it, but I'm going to. When Sheldon lost his head in the middle of a race, that was probably the biggest eruption from our fans the entire season. That certainly is a memorable moment. We've had renegade children start running into the outfield or onto the field when they're not supposed to, when they're supposed to be racing with Sheldon. Usually it seems like that segment seems to generate like the biggest highlights that we've had. But also, I think I personally have really, really enjoyed being able to highlight some of our community all-stars, especially when we surprise folks, because we have not planned a ton of those very far in advance. So we grab people that we know of or that folks introduce us to at each game, and they're so humbled, and you really can tell when you make somebody's day and really make them feel special. And it's just something that's been really, really, really cool. And then also, I would say I got a chance to be a part of an engagement very early in the season. And that's the second time I've had a chance to do that for someone. It's the only time we've done it this season. But to help facilitate something like that, that's such an important milestone for people in their lives, that's always a cool thing to do. So certainly a good amount of highlights this season.
And you mentioned so many different highlights, and you've had different wrestling guys out here at the ballpark, and they've been great in being participants in certain events on the field. And you brought Bobo from the Howard Stern Show out here to Jackie Robinson Ballpark last week. So at points during this 2021 season, you've had sort of a melding of worlds for you here at Jackie Robinson Ballpark. How has that made this season special, that you've been able to seemingly combine a bunch of different loves that you have into one sort of position here?
It's I think it's just more of who I am and how I am. I know what I like. I know how to incorporate it, and I just try to keep those worlds as consistent as I can. I think it helps me thrive in any of the worlds that I work in. For those that don't know, what we're referencing is I also work in professional wrestling as an announcer and as a commentator, so I operate in similar capacity to you do here for baseball. So getting a chance to mix that up and bring it into this world, but also other things that I just grew up a Howard Stern fan. My father and mother listened to it literally from the time I was born. It surrounded me my entire life. So reaching out to Bobo and arranging so that he could come here was really cool, and certainly I think earned some favor with my parents. Not that I need it these days, but they enjoyed it. And I forgot to mention when we had the Roosevelts guys out here. I mean, I've never been so excited to meet people that I have sent so much of my money to willfully. I wear their clothes, but you know what? That's kind of part of what my image has become as an entertainer. Those guys certainly do a lot to help me look a certain way that has gotten me here. So bringing them down and having a bunch of people that are also fans of that particular fashion, really, really cool. So it's been fun to meld all those worlds, and it's certainly made it an enjoyable experience for me. And I think it's been an enjoyable experience for our fans as well.
Now, you mentioned the entertainment side of things. I'm sure that may not have been the initial mindset for you probably when you were coming out of grad school and things like that. How did the young professor moniker sort of come to life, and what was the first thing you did to get your feet wet in sort of the entertainment industry? Because I'm sure you grew up a big wrestling and combat sports fan, and then to be able to come into that world must have been a special moment for you.
Certainly, and it was never anything that was expected. That was not, on any list of mine what I want to be when I grow up. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up if people ask me. But I got out of grad school. When I first met Jim, I was working at an event management company here in Daytona. But for the years leading up to that, I had worked through my undergraduate and graduate degrees in campus recreation. So I worked in fitness facilities, mostly for special events and for things not too different than what we do here, at least in some capacity. So I had that experience, and after a year living here, I wanted to go back into the world of higher education. My family circumstances were changing at the time, so it was a natural move. And after a year of working in admissions, I had an opportunity to come down back here to Daytona and work in the capacity of sports medicine and fitness technology, so exercise science. And I was a 25-year-old professor, which was pretty young, and most of my students were actually considerably older than me, since we mostly cater to military veterans and those kinds of folks were our students. So when I started in entertainment a couple years later, I started picking up some nightly gigs hosting trivia in Volusia County, as a matter of fact. And I did that for a while, and I was just Matt, and it was fine. But after a year or so, thinking back to things I'm a fan of, like wrestling, I always liked gimmicks, and I know that if you kind of have a shtick, that it kind of sticks a little bit more. Matthew is a very biblical name, but it's also a very generic name. Even here at the ballpark, sometimes people be like, "Hey, Mark," and I'm like, "Nope, it's not that. It just Professor is good. Like, if you're Matt, you're Mike, it's not memorable." So I knew I wanted to build a following in that arena. And so I was a 25-year-old college professor. So I was the young professor was what I came up with. And I held on to it as I started to venture into other sports, other endeavors, because the brand was already there. I had some local following, at least a little bit. And it seems to work. I'm still an educator. I'm no longer working in college, but I work in high school. And so the professor thing just works. And as I always like to tell people in my house, like, Matt doesn't make any money in the house. The professor is the one that people pay to see.
And you mentioned, you're still an educator, you still work in teaching, you work at a high school, you're still very passionate about that part of life. How have you been able to manage the demands that teaching requires with all the other things you do outside of that, in addition to what's it like for your students to, I'm sure there's been more than a fair share of them that have come out to Jackie Robinson Ballpark during the season, and, hey, my teacher's out there on the field leading, some of the fun things that happen on during the field in between innings.
It's certainly been cool. Fortunately, our season lines up nicely with the fact that school teachers do get a summer break. So there's only been a little crossover thus far. When we started our season, it wasn't that bad because we were kind of winding down. And so the year was already at an end. I was in my groove. So a few late nights out here at the ballpark weren't too bad. Summer was great, but being back now, so the first 2 weeks of school, because I work in Flagler County, first 2 weeks of school have been these past 2 weeks. We started on last Tuesday, not this past Tuesday, but the one before that, which also happened to be the first day of our 2-week homestand here. So I've been adding a lot of extra energy in the form of energy drinks to my repertoire so I can maintain the image I go for here. But if I'm being honest, this has been one of the roughest 2 weeks in my entertainment career because I'm really burning the candle, and I can't wait for tomorrow, Sunday. I can at least sleep till maybe 10 o'clock, and my God, that sounds like such a luxurious experience.
Well, I can guarantee you your sentiments are shared by the staff here with the Tortugas. We're very much, although we're very excited to have this 2-week homestand, also very excited to catch up on some much-needed sleep in the days to come. The young professor, the MC of Jackie Robinson Ballpark, thank you so much for stopping by the booth. If you haven't come out to the Jack this season to see the young professor, please do so. You're running out of time. There's only, I think, 8 games left, starting with tonight here at home. Thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a pleasure having you this season. We can't wait to see what happens in 2021 and beyond for you.
Justin, the pleasure's all mine, man. Been trying to get up here all season. Our paths don't often cross, so I'm glad today we were able to make it happen at Margaritaville Night. And as he said, come out and see us, folks. I've still got some more crazy outfits. We got Bob Ross night. I can't wait. That's going to be my grand finale, man. Wait till you see what I got on for that night. Just stay tuned.
I'm very much looking forward. So you got a teaser there. If you haven't bought your tickets to Bob Ross night, that is Saturday, September 4th. Do it now because tickets are going fast. The young professor, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. When we come back, we'll have starting lineups and first pitch here on the Tortugas Radio Network.